Hello, Notre Dame fans. My name is Greg Ladke of blueandgold.com. I'm joined by Andrew Jones for our show called The Other Sideline. He's the publisher of TarHeelIllustrated.com. That is the North Carolina home on the Rivals.com network. Andrew, let's talk a bit about, actually quite a bit, about the North Carolina football team. Obviously, it's been a disappointing start. What's the general feeling around the program, particularly coming out of a bye week?
Around the program, I think that they're optimistic because the last 5 games are against teams that are currently ranked.
Mm-hmm.
And the back end of the schedule everybody knew was going to be the tougher end. People thought they would kind of maybe struggle a little bit at times during the first 6 games, but find ways to win because the competition wasn't that stiff, and they went 3-3. So they hit a reset button after losing to Florida State at home and said, okay, the last 6 games, we got to win at least 3. Our goals have changed. We're not going to win the ACC. We're not going to the CFP. Sam's not going to win the Heisman. So let's get the seniors to a bowl and let's start steering this thing toward next season. And they did beat Miami. They found a way to beat Miami, even though they made Tyler Van Dyke look like Tom Brady for much of that game, which has been a problem in recent games. And I think right now they look at this as a major opportunity. The team that was ranked number 10 in the country was very young, and probably that was a bit more than what they should have been. Certainly performance has proven that. But they still think that they're a very good football team. Mm-hmm. So this week, and then they got Wake Forest. They actually have Notre Dame on the road, Wake Forest at home, and at Pitt in a 12-day span coming up.
Wow.
So they look at it as a wonderful opportunity to maybe validate some of what Matt calls the sugar and honey they were getting in the preseason, and an opportunity to maybe change the narrative of this season. And that begins Saturday night in South Bend, which I think is a game they can be competitive in because pretty much everybody has been competitive with the Irish so far.
You mentioned Sam Howell earlier. He was a Heisman candidate coming into the season. There's no doubt he's a talented passer of the ball. But what would just be your evaluation of him so far this season?
I think it's tough because they've got one wide receiver who gets open. Sam's completed 129 passes. 60 have been to Josh Downs, who's in the slot. You know, one of the things when you think of Sam Howell, you think of throwing over the top of the defense. Well, he's only got 10 completions, I believe, this season of 20 yards or more downfield, and 4 of those were against Georgia State. So they're not getting open. Josh Downs is getting open over the middle sometimes, but if he turns it into a big play, it's because the gifts that he was given naturally to be able to get by people. They're not getting the deep ball. The other receivers are not getting open. And because of that, and average at best pass protection up front, it's led to 27 sacks. He's actually been sacked 27 times, and the second most targeted receiver has been thrown to 26 times.
Wow.
So they have huge issues in the passing game. And because of that, I think it's tough to evaluate Sam. Some of the sacks have been because he's held onto the ball. He's trying to find somebody, trying to make a play. There are times where I think he takes off too soon because he's so used to the pressure coming from up front and everything breaking down. And he's actually on pace to rush for 1,000 yards. Yeah. So he's shown that he could run the ball. He could pick up third downs. He'll take a hit. He'll break some tackles, which I think scares the you-know-what out of Phil Longo and Mack Brown. But at times, it's been the only way they could move the ball. Their offensive numbers don't really indicate the kind of offense they've been because when they're not going well, they're bad. When they're going really well, they're pretty impressive.
Yeah, North Carolina ranks 127th in the nation in sacks allowed, and for tackles for loss allowed, 100th. That leads into my next question for you. The last couple times Notre Dame has played North Carolina, to me it looked like teams with quite similar talent at the skill positions, but it ultimately came down to Notre Dame being a more physical team up front. Where is North Carolina's progress with becoming a more physical team? That seems to me to be kind of the last missing piece for the program.
Yeah, Mack addressed that yesterday, on Monday, rather, when we had him for his weekly press conference. He said, look, last year, they were in the game, but Notre Dame enforced its will in the trenches in the fourth quarter and was able to pull away. That's where the program is trying to get to. They picked up a couple of 5-stars in the class of 22, one on each side of the ball, so I think they're climbing in that direction. But that's the hardest part of a football team to build. There's a lot of skill guys out there, but there are only a handful of really high-end dudes in the trenches, and they don't have a history, certainly a recent history of having those guys. So that's been a tough sell. As far as what they have in the field, they have more guys up front. I think they've been a little bit better at times up front, But I honestly, Greg, I think that the motto of this team, if you're characterizing your season, is wild inconsistency. There are times where the defense is fantastic against the run up front, and there are times where they are horrible. And when they go off the rails, they stay off the rails for a while. You look at, I'm going to give you a couple of quick examples here. Virginia had 366 yards and 28 points in the first half against Carolina. Okay.
Yeah.
Georgia Tech, which is a pitiful offense, they had 332 yards in the second half and 32 points. Florida State in the two middle quarters had 352 yards and 35 points. And then Miami in the second half last week was at like 345 yards. And I think the Hurricanes scored 35 points. So the Tar Heels are getting blitzed in segments of games, and they have a difficult time climbing out of it. And where do you usually stop the bleeding on defense? Up front. So I think that they've been really, really inconsistent up there. Their most talented guys are 18, 19, and 20 years old. And I think part of it is just a process. They need more seasoning. They need more reps. They need to get a little bit older. And I suspect they'll be better next year up front than they are right now. But they're not that good up front because they're not consistent. They don't know from one series to the next what kind of defense is taking the field.
I have one more question for you. I was looking a little bit over the last day at some of the film from this season for North Carolina, and there's a parallel in their losses with at least two of the three losses is the opposing quarterback ran for a bunch of yards. Jeff Sims at Georgia
Yeah.
Tech had 128 yards rushing. Jordan Travis for Florida State had 124 yards rushing. Burmeister even had a couple big plays in the Virginia Tech loss. Notre Dame's one of their two quarterbacks is a runner, Tyler Buckner. Do you think North Carolina spends some time in this bye week maybe trying to figure out how to make sure the quarterback doesn't ruin their game plan with his run inability?
Well, if you take Mack Brown at his word, yes, they did. In fact, they looked at 5 or 6 things that have not gone as they would like during the open date, and he listed running quarterbacks, I think, second on that list. And it's
Okay.
been a problem since Mack came back, and in Jay Bateman's defense. Jay Bateman's defense has a ton of communication responsibilities. The players are chattering during all 14 or 15 seconds in pre-snap, which isn't very long against these tempo offenses, and at times they're out of position. And they've admitted that they're out of position. In fact, Georgia Tech, Jeff Sims scored a touchdown from like the 4-yard line. He went in, touched into the end zone. Carolina had 13 players in the field. None of them were set. Sims got into the end zone and looked around like he thought maybe a whistle blown or the play didn't count. It didn't even celebrate yet because he figured that was so weird. I didn't know that this actually counted, but it did count. The Tar Heels were flagged, of course, but it was declined. So they have had some issues in that sense. And I think that's where some of the defending the quarterback issues come up. They actually had a spy on Jordan Travis for one play in the Florida State game, and it was a true freshman at linebacker, and they stopped him running on third down. They didn't do that again that game. Travis went off against him. So I would think, given Notre Dame some of their issues running the ball this year and some of their issues moving the ball, if you got a quarterback that can run, you might give him a series early against North Carolina and see what he could do because he could have some success.
Well, the Tar Heels and the Fighting Irish play Saturday night, 7:30 at Notre Dame Stadium. I'm looking forward to seeing Sam Howell and Josh Downs and Ty Chandler, very, very talented players from North Carolina. The
Yeah.
North Carolina's got great uniforms. Going up against the gold helmets, I think it's going to be an awesome scene. So I hope you're excited too, Andrew. And
Yeah, it'll be my second time there, Greg, and I absolutely loved my first visit. I spent so much time just checking things out, and I
mhm,
can't wait to go up again. All of my friends on Facebook will be inundated with photos from Notre Dame.
awesome. Well, travel
Can't
safe
wait.
and good luck with all the work you're going to have to do on Saturday night. So thanks again, man.
No
Appreciate you being
problem.
with us.
Thanks. Thanks for having me on.